Welcome to the Parent You podcast, where we want to frame the challenges of the teenage years for parents to see these years as a great work of sanctification in their lives and have a deeper understanding of each other and, most importantly, grow together in the grace of Jesus Christ. I'm Mark Long, and 5 years ago, I approached the leadership at Oak Mountain Presbyterian Church in Birmingham, Alabama, about a calling to pursue the hearts of parents and families with teenagers and to equip them to be proactive rather than reactive in their parenting. Technology is a blessing. We're more connected than we've ever been, with more access to information than what should be reasonably possible. On the flip side, all that access opens us up to new ideas and images that we cannot unsee. Pornography use is rampant in our society. One study shows that 93% of teenage boys and 62% of teenage girls have already been exposed to internet pornography. Exposure to it opens us up to all kinds of issues: unhealthy expectations, addiction, and devaluing God's design for sexuality and marriage. The problem is that porn use and sexual addiction comes with intense feelings of shame and regret. Parent You desires to be a resource to parents, to be in the trenches with you, and to point you to Jesus when faced with overwhelming, uncomfortable, and scary situations. To help us gain a perspective and remind us of our role when our children are hurting, we've invited Greg Oliver to the podcast. Greg, along with his wife, Stacy, founded Awaken in 2015 to help men and women and ministry leaders to navigate through sexual brokenness to a place of healing and freedom. Greg, thank you for joining us this morning.
Mark, I'm so glad to be here.
Well,
I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I am too, very, very much so. With that in mind, I was wondering, how did Awaken begin with you?
Yeah, I mean, it began the way a lot of ministries of its type begin, just as a natural outflowing of my own story. Before I started Awaken, for 15 years, I was in church ministry as a worship pastor. But even before that, and the whole time that was going on, I was also harboring the secret sexual addiction that had been really kind of building ever since my adolescent years. I mean, I wasn't a sex addict when I started using sex to try to get my needs met, but that's eventually where it went. And so just trying to juggle those two different lives, the one that people saw, the one that they didn't see for so many years, resulted in a pretty big crash in 2009 when everything was exposed and I lost my job and kind of, had a hugely traumatizing fallout for both me and my family and the people that were hurt by what I did. But that also opened the door to my own recovery, being able to finally get the help that I needed. And I found help and freedom through the gospel in the context of therapy and recovery. And so just I knew how impactful it had been for me, how healing it was for me and for Stacy as we were trying to actually build a healthy marriage where we hadn't ever really had that before. And God just gave me opportunities, gave both of us opportunities to walk with other people who were going through the same damage and destruction that we had gone through just a few years earlier. And eventually it became clear that not just kind of as something that we love to do, but this could be something that is like a ministry and like a profession. And so, 2015, we started Awaken as a nonprofit. And so for the last 9 years, we've been building a community and trying to build partnerships with church leaders like you, because the churches are becoming increasingly aware of how pervasive an issue this is, and I'm grateful for that. And what I'm even more grateful for is church leaders who want to shepherd their people effectively and graciously. And so we really try to partner with churches to help their people. Very
grateful. So thankful that there's a ministry like yours that men and women can go to. So let me ask you, with that, and for the sake of our audience, what's the strategy? What's the heartbeat?
Well, the strategy is really helping people to understand that all of this destructive behavior, was not really the point. Porn isn't the problem. Porn was your attempted solution to a deeper problem. And it's not just porn. Porn is usually where it starts for people who become sexually addicted, especially with the availability today. But it's going to escalate. I mean, it starts with porn, and then it ends up going to more consequential forms of acting out. But that's never the issue. That is the way that we're trying to deal with the issue. And a lot of times we don't even know what the issue is. And in a word, it's trauma. We're all carrying unresolved trauma, and we don't know how to even identify it or pursue getting help for it in the right ways. So we turn to something that provides comfort. I mean, in your introduction, you talked about how people who look at porn experience shame and regret. But before that, they experience pleasure, numbing. Yeah. It feels good. It does something. And that's what gets us hooked. And so, I mean, the strategy is to help people in a safe place begin to discover what is it that has been lacking that I've really been looking for, and how can I find that in healthy ways instead of unhealthy ways.
Yeah. So generally, what would that be? What's their need?
Connection. Yeah. I mean, if I'm to boil it down into one word, it's connection. It is to see and be seen, to know and be known. I mean, it was what God created Adam and Eve for all the way back in the garden. I mean, he would walk with them and they would enjoy that fellowship of connectivity with self, with others, and with God. I mean, you think about Adam, he had himself, he had Eve, he had God. Eve had herself, Adam and God. And we were meant to connect with self, others, and God. And we grow up in environments where even if we have the best caregivers, we don't get all of our needs met because they are broken caregivers, we are a broken care receiver, and we live in a broken world. And so despite everybody doing their best, which in most cases everybody doesn't do their best, but even if you say like, oh, my parents did the best that they could, and the parents who are listening now, if they're trying to do the best they can, your kids are not going to get everything that they need. And so we sense that internally in our nervous systems, in our emotions, and so we don't like how that feels, and so we will try to find something to either fill that gap or just to numb it so that we don't feel that gap. And so, you see a nervous kid who sucks their thumb obsessively. I mean, that's a self-soothing, comforting behavior. Well, you grow up and masturbating every time you feel anxious is the same strategy. It's just kind of grown along with you into a different season of life.
Right. I've talked with, I'm not a marriage counselor, but I do give counsel to marriage couples, and then I quickly, if I have to, hand them off to a good counselor. But one of the things I try to stress is that your partner is not going to meet all your needs.
Absolutely.
And you're putting them in an unfair position if you have those expectations. So I could see where, and then you can see where the marriage is kind of drifting. Yeah. Because they're going to start seeking that possibly in others or other things. So I agree with you. That's fantastic. So with this strategy of connection, and on a deeper level, what does that give them?
Well, I think it gives them what they were made for, which, I mean, connection gives them connection. I mean, I'm kind of answering the question with the same word.
Excellent.
Pursuing connection helps you exist in a state where you're not alone. I mean, and God even said it's not good for a man to be alone. And so when we recognize that we were not made for independence, which is a very American concept, but interdependence is a biblical concept. We were made to need each other, and we were made to need God. So dependent on God, interdependent on each other. So I think a lot of times when we provide connection, it helps people get a sense of, oh my gosh, this is what I needed all along, but I was afraid to pursue it because when I've done it in the past, maybe I didn't get what I asked for. Maybe I feared so badly that I wouldn't get it that I didn't even try. But we fear neglect, rejection, abandonment. And so because we fear how bad that would hurt, sometimes we don't pursue it. Or if we did pursue it and we got hurt, well, I'm not going to make that mistake again. And that's the thing. I mean, the good news, bad news that we offer people in our community is you're never going to get the reward of healthy relationships unless you take the risk of being rejected. Right. Vulnerability is the price of admission. And people have been burned so many times that they don't want to make themselves vulnerable. Right. But connection, which requires a certain amount of vulnerability, it pays off. Yeah. And over time, we develop that resilience to where it's not so scary to do it anymore. And we provide people a safe place to kind of dip their toe in the pool. in a confidential, safe recovery community where everybody in the room is just as screwed up as you
Right.
are.
Yeah, I know the community is so important. And I'm very thankful for that. I'm thankful for how God used it in my own life. All right, so somebody is struggling with sexual brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
What are they really afraid of? What keeps them from wanting to pursue help?
Well, I think shame. You've mentioned shame, because if they ask for help, they're going to have to expose a part of them that they think is going to illuminate something awful. Like, I can't have you know this about me, because if you knew this about me, then you would abandon me. You wouldn't want to have anything to do with me. I mean, God knows, but that's just because He knows everything. But a lot of people even feel like God has distanced Himself from them because of what they feel ashamed of. So yeah, I mean, we're afraid of exposure. And again, the thing that we can't see until we've taken the risk and tried it is, most of the time when we put out there the thing that we feel ashamed of, in a safe place, we'll hear, "Oh my gosh, is that all you got?"
Right.
Or "Me too."
Me too.
And
right.
and it's so comforting. But until we have experienced that, and then sometimes even after we've begun to experience it, man, the core belief of I am uniquely broken. If I start putting my stuff out there, even in this place, at some point it's going to become known that I'm worse than everybody else, and everybody's going to leave. And so I'm all on my own.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it ultimately kind of goes down to that. If my needs are going to be met, I have to be the one to meet them.
Yeah, and it's amazing. That's how evil pursues us in that sense of just trying to make us think that very thing. You're going to be all alone. That no one's really going to love you anymore.
That's
or
right.
care to want to be with you.
Yeah.
And you're right. I love when we're in the Parent U ADC sometimes on Sundays, and I'll introduce a topic, and then I get discussion happening, and there's a dad that says something that is just very profound, just decides to be a little vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, it's almost as if you can see light bulbs going off over people's heads going, you too?
And people are thinking, oh, thank God somebody said it first.
Right.
But because to your point, like, if I put this out there, people are going to reject me. Like, that's not something we think for no reason, because a lot of people have experienced exactly that. It's not okay to not be perfect. And so if we can realize that by being a safe person, by encouraging vulnerability, by demonstrating vulnerability, that's going to be how a lot of times we draw people out. And I think that's really important for parents to hear too.
Yeah.
Because your kids are going to tend to open up to you more if they think that you're going to understand. And how are they going to know that you understand if you don't ever open the vault to acknowledge that you're not perfect? I mean, spoiler, they already know that you're not perfect.
Right.
But if they don't know that you know that you're not perfect, then, what we're showing in our stoicism and our refusal to, acknowledge when we failed is that it's not okay to not be okay. So I think that, parents have a real opportunity to kind of set that tone and communicate something very different than our kids have probably already heard from a lot of different sources.
Yeah, I agree. I know that with my own children, you when they're in their teenage years, you sometimes feel like you're just beating your head on a wall, trying to get them to hear. But then all of a sudden, if I will just, if repentance is needed, be repentant in front of my kids. But two, I've found if I share a story from my own life of this similar brokenness, I mean, it's almost as if they sit up and they look at me in a different way.
I mean, how often do parents think, if my kids knew that I'd struggle with this, I would lose respect in their eyes? And the opposite is true. I mean, like to your point of your kids bringing their iPads and saying, I need you to hang on to this. I mean, that happens when A, they know that they've got a parent who's not going to condemn them. And B, it's a lot easier to do that if you know that you've got a parent who actually does understand, because they've been open to say, hey, this may not be something I'm struggling with right now, but it definitely has been. And let me tell you about that.
Yeah.
And not just referring to it hypothetically, but like I had a real problem with porn. And so I get what that's like. And I know what it's like to try to get through it without help, and I don't want that for you.
Amen. I remember before I became a Christian, there was no reason to not look at porn. None. I mean, even though I lived in a Christian home, I knew I had to hide it from my parents, and even my church quote friends. But when I was with my normal friends, it was no big deal. And so when after coming to know Christ, God did work on that. Just very similar the way He worked on my language, how I was just using my language, and I was not surprised He was going to do that, but I was surprised how He did it, because He utilized a friend of mine who showed me how pornography pursues you,
and even and leaps and bounds more now than ever because of technology. I mean, you started out with saying technology is a blessing, and it is. But everything that is created that can be used for good, obviously, evil is going to try to commandeer that and use it to steal, kill, and destroy. I mean, John 10:10 gives us the playbook for both Jesus and Satan. Enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I've come that you might have life and have it to the fullest. And so we know what evil and God are trying to do. And it's no wonder that something that has so much potential to do so much good is it's chasing our kids down. I mean, you misspell a URL and it's going to be linked to a porn site.
Right.
The algorithms in our social media, which don't get me started on how many kids are on social media way too soon, but the technology is getting to know them and learning how to tempt them and how to prey on all of their all their insecurities.
When it comes to this subject, I can see why it's hard and difficult for parents. And they don't want to talk about it until it really happens. But what, in your mind, what do you think parents could do to be more proactive rather than just reactive?
Well, the first thing I'd say is do your own work, because you can't nurture sexual integrity in your kids if it doesn't exist in your own life. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is just be honest with yourself. Like, hey, am I telling my kids not to do something that I'm secretly doing myself? So get healthy, ask for help so that you can quit passing down this generational sin and brokenness to one more generation of your family. And real quick, I'll just say with that, we don't get hooked on porn for no reason. I mean, it is often a strategy that develops to the point of addiction, because this is how we're dealing with the broken things in our life. And trauma gets passed down from generation to generation like a hot potato, until one of the generations is willing to say, I'm gonna feel the pain of hanging on to this and dealing with it instead of just passing it to my kids. And so pain moves through families until somebody is willing to feel it, is a expression that I've heard. And so doing your own work is saying it would be easier for me to ignore it and just ignore it in my kids, but I don't want that for myself or them. The second thing I would say after doing your own work is to really engage with your kids, and that might begin with the need for repair, especially if your kids are already way older than when you should have started talking to them about this. It's, the old proverb, I think it was an East Asian proverb, that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago and the next best time is today. No. So just saying, hey, I should have been talking to you about this so long ago and I'm sorry. I was awkward, uncomfortable, or I was dealing with my own stuff. That's not an excuse. You needed me to be present. Will you forgive me? And I want to take the time that we have left with you under this roof, and I want to try to do better. So that repair is really necessary. And then just being willing to have those awkward conversations, to know that you're trying to engage in a way where nobody ever engaged with you, right? I mean, I'm in my 50s, and so I had a generation where we were dealing with pornography in a way that was different than how it was available for our parents. So not only were they probably unwilling to talk to us about it, but they were unable to relate to us. But now, you've got parents of teenagers who have been addicted to internet porn. Now, internet porn has escalated and it's more harsh and extreme than it used to be. But we didn't have anybody helping us, and so we don't know how to help them. And so just acknowledging this is really hard for me because I don't want to look stupid. You probably know more about technology than I do. But what I do know is when we're using something to try to fix to fix something that this wasn't made for, It's going to feel like it's working, but it doesn't. So we just need to be able to talk about it and have no topics that are off the table. Have nothing that, puts your shocked face on. And so do your own work, make repair when necessary, and just engage with real transparency and honesty. I mean, even to the point where maybe you're so out there that you make your kids uncomfortable. Like, I would rather go that way than the other way.
Yeah, because they usually, act like they're going to throw up in their mouth if you start saying something about that.
And they might present that way, but just like I think there's a stat that says 75% of kids complain about how much control their parents have over their technology. But at the same time, over 80% of kids said they wish their parents were more engaged with what was going on in their lives.
Oh, yeah.
So they may say, I want you to give me my privacy. I want you to do this. But they really want you to be engaged.
Yeah.
And it's both and, because they don't like it when you do it, but something in them knows that this is nurture. This is getting what they need.
Yeah, Paul Tripp describes it this way. They put this hand up and this other hand is waving you
That's
in.
right. Yeah.
And it's very true. I mean, I've shared that 1,000 times because the first initial thing is, it can be based on all kinds of things, failures of the parent or feelings of inadequacy or failure. But if mom and dad will just see the other hand really is timidly waving them in, don't come in so hard, with shame and condemnation, but just going, I understand.
Right. And thank you for telling me that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really proud of you for taking the risk of telling me something. That must have been really hard for you to do.
Yeah, but it's just, I think about all the things that are out there trying to educate parents on what's really going to happen if you pursue your kids. It's just amazing. I mean, the way parents are depicted in our culture, the way dads are depicted in our culture, some, a lot of moms and stuff, and there's nothing there trying to unite them, nothing at all. And when you come to a subject like this, and the church has responded in such a horrible way at the very beginning, and Christians have not responded well at all, you could see where kids growing up with that might think, this is one area I can't talk to my mom and dad about. Yeah. But because of the way that the population has been exposed to pornography, I don't think there's a person, this is a bold statement, but I don't think there's a person that's never struggled with something like this.
Yeah. It's not that bold anymore. I mean, it's just acknowledging what's real. Yeah. And, before we started recording, you and I were talking about how if we believe that the age in which kids are getting exposed to hardcore porn continues to get earlier, and there's a lot of evidence that it is, 8 or 9 years old a lot of times. So by the way, parents, if you're waiting until your kids are like in middle school to talk to them, you're waiting too long, because most of them have seen porn probably by 4th or 5th grade, if not before, especially if they have older siblings or older neighbors, because of the whole saw it when they weren't even looking for it. So if they're seeing it that young, and we don't really offer solutions for people who've got porn addiction most of the time until they're 18, then what happens for that decade? Where do they get support in that decade? And parents, that's you. Like, you're their support in that decade. And we got to realize that often the contributions we're making to their lives because of our own unresolved and undealt with stuff is adding to their trauma, which is making them seek relief through porn. So if we really want them to be free from this, again, we have to do our own work. We have to be safe for them, and we've got to engage with them. We can't wait for them to come to us and say, hey, I have questions about porn. We've got to be the ones to bring it up, because a lot of times they're not going to feel like it's okay for them to. And so, really making sure that we're creating that safe place for our kids to be honest. Because if they're honest and the first thing that happens is they get in trouble, then lesson learned, don't be honest. Because they're processing the world through an immature prefrontal cortex, and they're very black and white. If I share something with mom and dad and they freak out, then therefore don't ever share with mom and dad again. So we got to really consider our initiating and also how we respond.
Well, I just want to say thank you. We could talk for hours about this.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you, plug Awaken a little bit for us. How can parents get involved?
Well, so first off, if you are listening and you've got a a need to get some help with your own sexual brokenness, please reach out to Awaken, awakenrecovery.com. There's a contact form. You can reach out to us. We'll confidentially and discreetly get with you. We've got support groups all around Birmingham and virtually, and other cities too, for men who are struggling with broken or unwanted sexual behavior, women who are struggling with the same, and for women experiencing sexual betrayal trauma from their partners. And so really, whichever one of those you fall in, we've got some help for you. And then we just earlier this year started our own podcast called What We Really Want, Conversations About Connection. It's been going since April of 24. And the whole thing, what we were talking about earlier, we are not a ministry about teaching people how to not look at porn. Like that's playing defense.
Right.
And obviously not looking at porn is good. It's healthy. It's better than looking at porn.
Right.
But we want to teach people to play offense. What am I looking for when I go to porn? Because when I go to porn, after I'm done, I know that wasn't what I really wanted. So what did I really want? And so the whole podcast is about exploring different experiences with healthy connection with God, with self, others, and God. And so what we really want is a good resource for anybody.
And friends and neighbors, I can tell you, I completely endorse Awaken. I've known about it for years. I've known the staff for years. We've had them here in our church at family conferences and all these different things, and then got the opportunity to listen to some of the podcasts. And I would encourage you, if you're looking for one to listen to, that would be a great one. So I would encourage you with that.
That's really kind. Thank you.
You're very welcome. One of the things we try to do is end with a gospel connection. And I really did. I thought about, wow, how do I do this? And I'm looking and thinking and praying. And this one theme just kept on coming back to me. And it's Joshua 1:5-6. It says, "No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous." And when it comes to this, if we want to handle this brokenness, this sexual brokenness in the legalistic way they did way back in the day, we're going to just return to it. But if we really are honest with each other, if we're honest with ourselves, and we seek the Lord in this way, the Lord will come after you. I really believe that. And he's going to come to you and tell you the first thing, before he even told Joshua to be strong and courageous, he says, I am going to be with you. And one of the voices I heard in my head, even after becoming a Christian and God doing a great work in my life, was that he reminded me that over and over again, I'm going to be with you through this. I'm going to stay there. So thank you again, Greg.
Such a pleasure to be with you. Thanks.
Parent U is a ministry of Oak Mountain Presbyterian Church. I'm Pastor Mark Long, and thanks for listening.